We're learning the second Sicha in Chelek Yutes, Parshas Yisavai, on page 235. Shengeret Filmal. We spoke about this many times. As Chotch Rashi kumt mefarish zayin l'chol haroish pshutim shel ksuvim. That it's true that the main purpose of Rashi is to explain the simple pshat of the psukim, and talta b'zayin pirish oich yene shel teire pnimius v'rozen deiraisa. It also contains the wine of Teire, the secrets of Teire, the inner part of Teire. Wie de bewusste Wort von Alten Rebbe, as the famous saying that Alten Rebbe said, was die Woch Parshas Kumi Yairi Chayelol Izayim Meledes. This week, which is referred to as the Parsha of Kumi Yairi because of the Haftarah, which is Kumi Yairi, is the birthday of the Alten Rebbe Chayelol. Wie yidua de Wort von Baal Shem Tov bezeh. It's known what the Baal Shem Tov said regarding the Alter Rebbe's birth on this day of Chai Elul, that the Alter Rebbe's birth was a Kumi Yairi. This was a day, it was on a Wednesday, and the Wednesday is the day Shabai Nitlu Ama'iris. The luminaries were hung in the sky. This is the day of Kumi Yairi, that the light of the Alter Rebbe came into the world. V'zayim Meledes is Yom Chai Elul. The Baal Shem Tov's Yom Meledes is also on Chai Elul. So this is in general what the Alter Rebbe said about Rashi B'chlal, that there's Yene Shal Teire. On Hazayis is Benegeya, the Pirushi Rashi, Bepashasena of the Divrei Teichacha. So the same is also true regarding Rashi here in this week's Parsha, where we have this week the Teichacha. When we can sagen as, we can say even more so, as this is Nochmer, Benegeya, Pirush Rashi, Ba Teichacha. This concept that you have in the Rashi, the secrets and a deeper dimension of what Rashi is saying, is even more so in the Rashi on the Teichacha. Leuten Bier von Alten Rebbe, Lekute Teire, Benegeya, the Divrei Teichacha Atzmam. And this is understood according to what the Alter Rebbe says in Lekute Teire regarding the Teichacha itself. So the Alter Rebbe this says, Agam as begolui is der Teichen Heipach HaBracha. In a revealed sense, the Teichacha is the opposite of a bracha. Is Abulafia Emes, Einam Rak Brachas. The truth is that all of the Teichacha is only brachas. Teire hatten sich Sassen vegalya. Teire is in two layers. There's the concealed aspect of Teire and the revealed part of Teire. Und der Sassen, upnimius, v'neshame, von the klalis, so the concealed and the soul of what these klalis are is an inyan von brachas, nailas b'yaser. Not only are they brachas, but they're actually very high brachas. Al derech wie me gefind in Gemara, like we find a story in the Gemara where Hanach kula birchas ininu. When there was a story there with the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Rabbi Eliezer, where he got what seemed to be the opposite of brachas, and his father, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, explained to him that it's really all brachas. And it's the same thing also here in the psukim in the Teire, that the teichacha, which externally are klalis, but really they're brachas, and they're brachas nailas b'yaser. So this is regarding the psukim themselves. B'dugma lezeh is as b'negeya the pirushei Rashi of the teichacha. So similar is also true regarding the way Rashi explains the Teichacha. The pshat von Rashi, the simple pshat of Rashi, kumt reis brengim dem geidel haloitev lefi pshute shel mikra. Rashi comes to explain every detail of the pasuk and to explain the negative of what the intention of the psukim are in the simple pshat. Aber let yene shel teire von Rashi. But the deeper dimension, the wine, the deeper understanding of Rashi, kommen dieselbe Werte von Rashi. The very same words of Rashi are here, areis brengen de pnimius, und meisav sein hat Goshe in die brachas nailes von der Teichacha. The words of Rashi explain and emphasize and show what great brachas are contained over here in these psukim of the Torah. So the Rebbe will focus here on one pasuk of the Teichacha, the very last pasuk of the Teichacha, to express this concept. Beim Siyam HaTeichacha zok the pasuk. By the very end of the Teichacha, the pasuk says, "Ve'eshivcha Hashem Mitzrayim ba'aniyos." The Eibishter will return you to Mitzrayim in ships. B'derech, in a way, asher amarti l'chol l'seisu v'od l'roisa. In a way that I told you that you will never see it again. V'smakartem sham lo'ivecha. And over there you will offer yourself up to be sold for your enemies, la'avadim v'l'shvachos, as a slave, as a maid, ve'ein kaina, and nobody will buy you. That's the taich of the pasuk. The pashtus is move on. Now, in the simple sense, we understand as we bald der pasuk steht beim Seif v'siyum von der Teichacha. This is the very last pasuk of the Teichacha. So this is expressing, this is the ultimate of the teicheche, the negativity that there's here is in this pasuk more than in any other psukim. Isn't it move on? If so, the question is, was ist die gewaltige Paranius von dem, was jeden wollen sich umkehren in Mitzrayim v'chulu, und keiner wird sie nicht wollen kaufen, als Avadam schwach ist. What's the terrible thing here about the fact that Yidden will return to Mitzrayim, they'll offer themselves up for sale, and no one will be interested in acquiring them. No, it's doch good, so then they could leave. No one is interested in buying them as Avadam schwach ist. Is this Rashi Mevayer? So this is the question that Rashi here comes to explain the simple pshat of the pasuk. Ba'aniyais, so Rashi says, what does aniyais mean? B'sfinais, b'shivya. They're going to come in ships in captivity. Das heißt, man wird kommen in Mitzrayim als Shvuyim. They're not going to venture to Mitzrayim on their own, but they're going to come there in captivity. That's one part of the Hepech HaBracha here. Und für ein keine, sagt Rashi, when the pasuk says that no one will want to buy them, what does this mean? Why not? Ki yigzeru alecha hereg v'kilayin. It's because they will decree upon them to be killed, to be exterminated. So this is also a opposite of a bracha. That's Rashi. So learning the b'ashkafa rishayna, when you learn these two Rashis superficially, kumtais, it comes out as follows: as in their pastiks and in da tzvei paranias beikar. That this pasuk contains in it primarily these 2 points of punishment. Aleph, Yidden velen kommen ke Mitzrayim b'shivya. That Yidden are going to be captured. They're going to arrive into Mitzrayim in captivity. Beis, another point is, Yigzru alecha hereg v'kiloyin, that it'll be a gzeira upon the Yidden to be killed and exterminated. Und die ibere gewerteren pasuk, all the other words that it says in the pasuk, baniyais, how they're going to get there, they're going to come in ships, that they are coming in a way that they were promised that they will not be there again, and and that they will try to offer themselves up for sale to be sold, and it won't work because they're going to be exterminated. These are just details in the circumstance that will happen or cause these 2 main points, which is the shivya and the hereg v'kilayin. That's the simple pshat of the Rashi here. However, we could say, as Rashi, that if you look into Rashi and you pay attention to the words he says, Gitzu verstehen, so Rashi is explaining to you, V'yede praten posik is meisif azach hepach hatoiv la'atzmai kidl kaman. Each detail is adding another part of the hepach hatoiv, the opposite of good, of what the posik here is telling you. And therefore, similar, we could also say when we see the neshama of this, the pnimius of this, and the yena shel Torah, v'yede vart an inyan kommt meisav zayin in geidel ha'ilui v'habracha was wird zayin by Yidden, is adding another greatness into the level and to the bracha that Eibush will bring the Yidden to. So what's the hesber here? Das verstehen, so we'll understand this by haktem levaye, by first explaining what the pasuk is madgish, this that the pasuk emphasizes here, vehishivcha baderech asher amarti lecha leseisevayt l'raisa, that the Eibusher will bring you back to Mitzrayim in a way, in a route that he promised that you will not see this place again. The lechayres, seemingly the question here is, was ist denn afgemine, und was ist das negeya in der teicheche? What's the relevance of this? And how does this add anything to the teicheche that this is a way that they were promised that they will never be there again? This adds to the level of punishment. How? And we don't find that Rashi should answer this question, which is addressed by other Mefarshim. Mefarshim says, the Rabbi here points to the Abarbanel, as the mit is the pasuk masber favos the veheshivcha is dafke ba'niyos. This explains why the Yidden will be returned to Mitzrayim specifically in ships. Vibalt as the Rebbe had gesagt leiseisavoid l'reisa. The Rebbe promised that Yidden will not see Mitzrayim again. In dem derech leiseisifun loshuv baderech hazeoid, that the Yidden will not return to Mitzrayim in this way that they came out of Mitzrayim. Kann doch nicht sein, as Yidden wollen kommen ke Mitzrayim baderech hazeh durch Yabasha. So it's impossible that promise should be broken and the Yidden will be brought to Mitzrayim in this way, on dry land, the way they came out. The Ribber is the pasuk madgish ve'shivcha be'aniyos, and therefore the pasuk says that they're going to come to Mitzrayim in ships, which is a different route, not the way they came out of Mitzrayim. That's what the pasuk is coming to clarify. Es ist aber schwer zu einlernen azoi im Pshuto shel Mikra derech Pirish Rashi ala Torah. But on the simple meaning of the pasuk, which is the way Rashi explains always, it's difficult to learn this way. Weil, because the question still remains, Lamai nafgemine in der Teicheche, zu bewahren, as the Veshivcha Hashem Mitzrayim is nit bestire zu leiseise veidle reisa. In the Teicheche, where the subject is to discuss the punishment of the Eibishter in this Teicheche, why is it necessary to clarify and answer a question that this punishment is not a contradiction to the promise that the Eibishter gave before? This is not the place to clarify that. And specifically, the question is even more so, as l'chayre hat nit gedaft stein, bederach asher amarti l'cha leiseise veidle reisa. The pasuk did not have to add this line that this is a way that Hashem promised that you won't see again. This detail that this is a way that you will not see again doesn't add anything to the level of punishment either. So if you don't add that detail here, so you don't have to clarify how they can be returned to Mitzrayim, that it's only through ships. So the whole thing is extra. The point, the subject that we're discussing over here is the Teicheche. And in that sense, this whole thing of bavaroning, of how the Eibishter could bring them back in this same way, is not relevant here for the Teicheche. Now seemingly we could offer a different explanation. Al derech wie steht in Medrash Leketov, similar to what it says in the Medrash. As the Pasuk will the mit madge sein, zu was the Averis sind all zu defieren. It's emphasizing what Averis could lead to. What is that? So although the Eibishter promised that that you will not come to see this way again, to come to Mitzrayim, können aber the Chatoim geirim sein, as the Eibishter soll mevatel sein die Avtache. The Averis could cause that the Eibishter should break this promise. In other words, different than the pshat that we said before, that the Eibishter is sort of circumventing his promise and bringing them in a different way. Adarabah. The point of the pasuk here is to explain that through Averis you can cause the Eibishter to break his promise. That's how difficult and how the bad result of an Avera is. Aber euch das ist nicht glattig b'pshuta shel mikra. This as well is not a smooth pshat in the pshat of the pasuk here. Warum? Since if zu wissen dem Minyan, to know this point, as a chet ubefrat chatoyim gedolim, that an Avera, and especially Averis in a very large degree, can geinim sein the bittel avtache von dem Eibishter, that this could cause the Eibishter to annul his promise. Darf man it ankommen zu the klalis hachi gedolis. This is not something which you have to come to these curses on the highest level. Befrat noch beim Siyum von der Teicheche, the conclusion, the very last point of the Teicheche, that this is emphasizing the peak of what the Teicheche is. This is something that we learned before by Yaakov in Parshas Vayishlach when it comes to Esav, and Yaakov was afraid. Why was he afraid? Even though the Eibishter promised him that he will save him, that will come back b'shalom, but he was afraid, as Rashi there says, Shemenis lachlachti bechet. Maybe he has Averis, and therefore the Eibishter will annul his promise. So we see the same by Yaakov already. So over here in the Teicheche, and by the peak of the Teicheche, this point to emphasize that an Avera could cause a promise to be annulled is not smooth in the pshat of the pasuk here. V'oid, another point, was ist das Negeya Dafke, und der Fahrer ist es Dafke in dem Inyan von der Ashavah Mitzrayim. This idea of what an Avera can cause, how is this connected to specifically this Teicheche, this Puranius, returning to Mitzrayim? There doesn't seem to be any connection specifically to this Puranius. This is a point b'chlal, b'negei to all the Teicheche, b'negei to all of the Averis of what an Avera could cause. But if it's being brought here, it seems that it's connected specifically to this punishment of Yidden returning to Mitzrayim. Upshite, and it's also obvious, as es hat nicht genart al pipshute shemikra lernen, there's no room in the pshat of the pasuk to say, as chach es given atzivi Hashem nit zirik zu gehen b'derech hazel Mitzrayim. The Eibishter commands Yidden, it's a mitzvah, you're not allowed to go back to Mitzrayim. Is the ched geirim, so the Rebbe is quoting here, based on what it says also another pshat there in the Medrash, that here we see what an Avera could cause. As the Eibishter rechnet sich nicht mit dem, the Eibishter does not consider this, bringt sie euch zu euch sein auf den Zivoi. And what happens when you do one Aveda is that this causes and brings you to be over another Aveda. Seemingly similar to the concept of Aveda Gereres Aveda. When you do one Aveda, the Eibishter allows you to be drawn into another Aveda. You didn't do Avedas, and then they'll end up doing another Aveda, which is to return to Mitzrayim. That's l'chayra pshat that we could say according to what it says in the Medrash, that that's what the pasuk is emphasizing here. That yet the taka doing an Aveda going back to Mitzrayim, but that's exactly what an Aveda causes. That one brings another. So the Rebbe says, no, this is obvious. We can't say that this is what the pasuk is emphasizing here. Weil was for a shayches zu der teicheche hotos was chatoyim bringen so eve sein auf noch hat zivui bal korcham. Here the subject is the teicheche, the punishment that the Eibusher says will come upon Yidden. So that subject, what connection does it have to this point that when you do a one Aveda, it causes you against your will to be drawn into doing another Aveda? That's seemingly a separate point, and that's not the subject of the punishment, which is what the pasuk is talking about. So the Rebbe will here bring a different pshat in explaining what the pasuk is doing with all these details, and that as we'll see, the Rebbe will explain that every single detail of the pasuk is adding another point. Wird sein verstandig behektem a Tosfos Biur in Pirish Rashi auf Ba'niyos. So we'll understand all of this by first giving an additional explanation in the Rashi on the word Ba'niyos. So Rashi says two words, B'sfinais b'shivya, that we're going to come in ships in captivity. L'chayre, so now seemingly that uptaich as Yidden wollen gehen in Mitzrayim b'shivya. So this that Rashi explains that Yidden are going to come to Mitzrayim in captivity. Is Shayech nit zum Wort Ba'niyos. This is not an explanation of the word Ba'niyos, nor zum Wort V'eshivcha. This is explaining the word V'eshivcha, that they will be returned. How will they be returned? They will be returned in captivity. As the Rebbe wird sie dort umkehren als Shvuyim. Hat doch Rashi gedarf, dass mefarish sein by V'eshivcha. So Rashi should explain this inyan of captivity in that word of V'eshivcha. Und nicht in dem Dibur, wo teicht up the Wort Ba'niyos, and not in the Rashi, where he's translating the word Ba'niyos, that it refers to ships. That Rashi is saying two different things. Ba'niyos means b'sfinais, which is ships. And then Rashi says how they're going to come. They're going to come in captivity. That's a different point. That belongs before in the word V'eshivcha. The Bali Tosfos Lernenein. So there's the pshat of the Bali Tosfos in this pasuk. As Ba'niyos is meisiv in the shivya. The fact that they're coming in ships adds to this that it says that they're captured. And it says as follows, if they would be coming on dry land by foot, so then that means that they're only capturing the adults that can walk. But now that the pasuk says that they're being captured and brought in ships, Yushavim Tafenoshim. So then they're capturing also the children and the women as well. So it's adding to the captivity that everybody, even the women and children, will be captured as well. Von dem aber was Rashi sagt b'shivya stam. But in Rashi, the fact that Rashi just simply says captivity, and Rashi doesn't add details here. Nit zugeben the came be, not adding any explanation. It's verstandig, it's understood, as Leute Rashi is der Oiftu, nit in dem was the shivya vet herumnehmen allem. The chiddush here is not the fact that they're coming on ships and therefore the shivya, the captivity, includes everybody, oich nashim v'tav, the children and the women as well. Not in dem etzim inyan var ze kumen dort ba'niyos v'zayin b'shivya. This itself, there's a point in this itself that being captured, coming on a boat, there's an additional teicheche in this itself, not the other details that are mentioned in the Tosfos, that this includes also the nashim and taf. So what is this? That's the Rebbe's question here. What's the connection between captivity and the fact that they're being brought on ships? The explanation is as follows. Rashi is mefarish. If you pay attention to what Rashi is saying here, Rashi is coming to explain, as the alle pratim v'shtein in pasuk, all of the details that it says here in this pasuk, sind nicht stam pratim von ein kloles de geteicheche, as me vet Yidden umkehren kein Mitzrayim. It's not just one general teicheche, and the point being that Yidden are going to be brought back to Mitzrayim. Now, jeder von sie, one of the details in the pasuk is meisif euch a besondere teicheche. It's adding another part of the teicheche here. Und der Rebbe lernt Rashi, and therefore Rashi says, As das was the pasuk is meirich, the fact that the pasuk is being so lengthy here, and it's saying ba'aniyos, that they're coming back on ships, and baderach asher amarti gomer, as we'll explain soon, is das an inyan neisef. This is an additional point of the teichecha, as follows. In Zug of to the teichecha was in dem etzem umkennen sich in Mitzrayim, in addition to the teichecha itself, that the Yidden are going to be returned to Mitzrayim, that euch der Vega hinzu, the very experience that they'll have on the way going there, sein in an Eufen garua b'yosef, will be in a very terrible, bad way. And in zwei praten, and the pasuk here says two details about the negative experience in the way getting to Mitzrayim. This is a teichecha for itself. Aleph ba'niyos. What does ba'niyos mean? B'shivya, that they're going to be captured. Das heißt, levad zeis, was in Mitzrayim, wollen sie sein b'shivya, besides the fact that arriving to Mitzrayim, there they'll be captured, wollen sie euch der Weg ke Mitzrayim durchmachen als Shvuyim in aniyos. Also the way to Mitzrayim, they'll also suffer in captivity. Was das ist verbunden mit asach zar wie Yisurim, this is a lot of pain and suffering. Viel mehr wie die Tsar von Gein B'Shivya durch der Yabasha. If you're arriving to Mitzrayim and you're arriving in captivity, you could be arriving in captivity on dry land, or you could be coming in captivity on a ship. On a ship, it's much more pain and suffering. Warum ba'niyos on ships is men mehr und starker unter die Moros von die was haben sie gefangen. Wie mir sieht es bepashtus. On a ship, you feel much more controlled and secluded and stuck under the people that have captured you there in this ship more than if you're traveling on dry land. So therefore that's the added detail here that the pasuk is saying, a separate teichecha, that your way to Mitzrayim will also be with pain and suffering because you'll be in captivity. And on what level of captivity? In extreme circumstances, on a ship. Und damit es euch move on, for was Rashi will not learn wie die Balei Tosfos. We can understand why Rashi did not want to learn like the Pshat brought before from Tosfos. Weil Neusef of them was in Pashtus kennen euch taf enoshim gein zu Fuss al kolpanem ahalich laat. In addition to the fact that the very point itself that the Balei Tosfos say that children, women are not going to be brought in captivity if they're going by foot. Simply speaking, they could also come by foot. They can walk slower. They could also be captured and go on dry land. Und wie es ist gewesen bei Yetzias Mitzrayim, when Yidden left Mitzrayim, so they came out of Mitzrayim on dry land. The men, women, and children all came out and they walked out of Mitzrayim. Is loitze pirish. So according to the pshat of the Balei Tosfos, kumtais as nit dem etzem umkennen sich ba'niyos is a teichecha for sich. This experience of coming in the ships is not a teichecha, a separate point of a teichecha for itself. Nor es is blois meisiv in dem klolosdigen teichecha from ve'eshivcha Mitzrayim. There's only just one point there. The teichecha is that they're going to be returned in captivity in Mitzrayim. That's it. Elamai, this is adding to that. Das is kailul alamin. Who's going to come back to Mitzrayim? Everybody. Not only the adults, also the children and the women as well. But it's just one teichecha. Well, if according to the pshat of Tosfos, if it's just one point, hat lechat chile gedarft stehen, v'heishev Hashem kulchem, v'chayetze b'zeh, that the Eibush is going to bring to captivity who? Kulchem, everybody. Aber nit zugeben es als a naye minyan. The fact that the pasuk adds a whole other subject here, that you're going to come in ships on a way, it seems like the pasuk is coming to add another point. So therefore Rashi says that the pshat of the pasuk ba'niyah is this is a separate teichecha. The experience on the way. That the experience on the way itself is the pain and suffering being in captivity, and not stam in captivity, but in an extreme captivity, specifically on a ship. That's Rashi's pshat. Beis, another point here is Baderech asher amarti lecha loiseisuf oid l'raisa. In a way that I told you that you will not see this way again. So this is another separate point of teichecha. There's another inyan of suffering that's expressed in this, that's a teichecha for itself. As sie wollen sich umkennen kein Mitzrayim, durch den Weg, wo sie sind schon früher durchgegangen. They're going to return to Mitzrayim, coming in this way that they already have gone before in this way. Which is which way? Durch den Midbar, HaGodel, Va'aneira, Nachash, Sara, Va'akra, V'tzimoyin, Hashem Mayim. Through this way, going through this awesome great Midbar which has snakes and scorpions and there's no water there and so on. The description of this Midbar. Und kemuvan bepashtos, as die Nissen v'chasadim von der ersten Haliche in Midbar. So we understand this bepashtos, that the great miracles that the Eibishter did when the Yidden came in this Midbar the first time, that the Eibishter prevented and shielded them from all of this, was the Far, hat der Eibishter maftiach gewen, as in dem derech le'seisef oid le'roisa. That was the reason why the Eibishter promises that they're not going to ever come through this way again, because of the tremendous danger that there is in this Midbar. Is move on, der Geid la teicheche in der Haliche durch dem derech. So this is a separate teicheche, that Yidden are also going to be brought to Mitzrayim through this way that I told you that you're not going to be there again. And what's this way? As we learned already before in the pasuk of how dangerous and how terrible of an experience it is to be in this derech, going through this midbar. So again, as we see here, each point is a teicheche for itself. Und Rashi darf es nicht austeitschen befehlisch. This detail, Rashi doesn't even spell it out clearly. Kishem, wie darf nicht austeitschen, dem Gödel Laperonius von der Shivcha Hashem Mitzrayim. Rashi does not spell out what's the punishment of the fact that Yidden are returning specifically where? To Mitzrayim. Weil Rashi hat erst mefarisch gewen. Rashi already explained before, as ein miyaran es ha'adam ele bedava shehu yagur mimenu. You scare someone with something that he's experienced before and he's afraid of. So over here, Mitzrayim is the place that the Yidden were there and they're afraid of this. That's why it mentions Mitzrayim. Und Punkt wie dem Etzem umkennen sich kein Mitzrayim, als euch der Derech zu Mitzrayim, is by Yidden adovashu yagam imenu. So just like Mitzrayim itself is a place Yidden know about, and they're afraid of this, the way going to Mitzrayim, in this Midbar Gadol V'Neira, the Yidden also know exactly what kind of suffering there could be if you're forced to come back in this way without having the Nissim and Chasadim of the protection that the Eibishter gave the Yidden. Al pizeh, wird man euch verstehen dem Hemshich in Pirish Rashi. I've divided the Gewerter in demselben Pasuk. We can now understand what Rashi says in the continuation in this Pasuk, which the Rebbe did not quote in the beginning. So Rashi says, "Vis makartem sham loivecha." What do these words mean? Atem mevakshem liyos nimkarem lahem laavadim v'lishvachis. That you yourself will offer yourself up for sale as slaves and maids. This means that not that others will come to sell you as slaves, nor as ihr wilt sich allein verkaufen. Wie Rashi is masbe bedibbe shel achrei, but you yourself will want to sell yourself as slaves. That's the Rashi in the afterwards explains the word v'his makartem. V'his makartem means that you yourself will attempt to sell yourself as slaves. That's what Rashi says. The l'chayre tamua. So seemingly this is not understood. How could Rashi say that they will offer themselves up to be sold? Das ist doch bestiert zu dem, was hat mefarisch gewen, als werden geführt ke Mitzrayim b'shivya. Rashi said that they're being brought to Mitzrayim in captivity. Ubemele nitten am matzav zu verkaufen sich allein. So they're not in any situation where they could even offer themselves up for sale. No dafke durch meichrem achayim. It's those people that they're in their control, that capture them, that could sell them. So how could Rashi say that they're brought in captivity and right afterwards explain that this makarta means that they will desire to be sold, that they will offer themselves up for sale? Move on. Another question here is, was is the pasuk takim medayik v'his makartem nit durch meichrem acherim? Why is the pasuk here being very specific about this? That they will offer themselves up for sale, not that others will sell them. Wie bald der Eisfir is, as ve'ein keine. The conclusion, the chayr, it seems like the main teicheche here is the conclusion that nobody will buy them. Because the decree will be that they should be killed. Is doch schon in ganzen kenaf geminnet wer sehr meicher is. So why is it relevant to say that the one that's selling them is not someone else, but they are offering themselves up for sale? That's not the main teicheche. The teicheche is that they're going to be killed. Ve'ein keine, because yigzru alecha hereg v'kilayin. So again, the Rebbe will explain here how this detail itself, his makartem sham loivecha, is a point of teicheche for itself. It's not just part of the next part of the teicheche, which is ve'en kainen. No, this is a point for itself. Nor the biyeh bezeh, so the explanation here is, v'balt as jede prat is meisif in the teicheche an inyan la'atzmai kanal. As we saw in the first part of the pasuk, every part of the pasuk is adding another separate detail in the teicheche. A point for itself. Led into the Rashi, so therefore Rashi explains here as well, as the pasuk ret nit wegen am mechire durch die was führen die Yidden b'shivya. So here, we're not talking about the Yidden being sold by those that have captured them. Because if that's what's happening, so then that's not a new teicheche here. They're already in captivity by those people, total control under them, and they can do with them whatever they want, including selling them as slaves. So that's not a new added teicheche for itself. No, rather, the pasuk here is bringing you a new point of teicheche. As the matzav b'shivya v'et azay schlecht, and not stam going to be in captivity, but the situation in captivity will become so terrible. Biz, as what's going to happen is aleph atem mevakshim liyais nimkarem lahem la'avodim v'lishvachis, that the Yidden are going to want to be, they're going to offer themselves, they're going to look, they're going to try to be sold as slaves. Ir vet velen ubemele zuchen sich allein zu verkaufen als avodim v'shvachis. You're going to try as much as you can to be sold as slaves and maids. Durch beten das und einwirken auf die was haben euch genommen beschibja. You're going to try to convince those that you are in their captivity to sell you into slavery. In other words, the situation in captivity is going to be so bad that you'll rather be sold into slavery than be in this captivity. Beis noch mehr zu vemen loivecha. You'd rather be sold as a slave to your worst enemies than be in this captivity. That's the additional point of teicheche here. Not stam that you're in a captivity and now the ones that capture you can do whatever they want with you, including selling you into slavery. But this is describing an additional level of suffering that's happening here in this captivity, that the conditions are so bad that you'd rather be a slave to your worst enemies. So that's the hismakartem, that you yourself will desire this. That explains the terrible conditions of captivity. The mit kommt zu euch hat teises bier in Perish Rashi euch ve'en keine ki yigzru alecha hereg v'kilayin. So this explains additionally what Rashi means by this when Rashi says ve'en keine, that no one will buy you because there'll be a decree to kill you. So over here as well we'll see what Rashi is saying here, that there's an additional point of teicheche. Al pi now, based on what we said before, what given an art to learn. You would think that we would say, as ve'en keine is nar der oisfir von der friedige teicheche v'his makartem. You could learn and explain that this is not a new teicheche for itself. This is concluding the point of the teicheche that it said before, that they will be in such terrible conditions in their captivity, so much so that they'll try to convince the ones that capture them to sell them. As ihr wilt sich verkaufen zu lieben bitter matzev zu oivecha, that because of the bitter situation you're in, you'll be even ready to be sold to your enemies. On ve'en keine, so then what does ve'en keine mean? It's the conclusion of this point. They will nicht kaufen, that means they will not want to buy you. And what will happen is you'll remain stuck in that place, in this terrible condition in captivity. So if that's how we would learn, ve'en kaina is not a new point. Ve'en kaina is the conclusion of this point here, that you're in such bad conditions that you'll try to do whatever you can to get out of it, and you won't be able to. You'll remain captured in that situation. Rashi, see here, Rashi comes and explains, as euch in them is faran, in these two words of ve'en kaina, we also have here nit nar di gute teitzav and vis makartem. It's not only the negative result of the vis makartem, that you will try to be sold and you won't be successful. Like we saw in the rest of the pasuk, every detail is another point of teicheche here, and this is also an additional point of teicheche. Was is nit verbunden mit vis makartem, which is not related to what it says before, that you will attempt to be sold and you'll be stuck in the terrible conditions you're in. Now rather, as ve'en kaine is to leave them, was yigzru alecha herek v'kilayin. When it says en kaine, what this is saying is that there will be a decree upon you that you should be killed and exterminated, which is techache betachlis. This is a new and the ultimate teicheche of full extermination. Und der Rebbe is das der Siyum von der ganze Teicheche. This is the end and the conclusion and the peak of the entire Teicheche, this inyan of Herek v'Kilayin. So this is the conclusion of the simple pshat of Rashi, where Rashi explains the Teicheche, and as the Rebbe explained, let's look back at the pasuk now. Every single detail of the pasuk is adding another part to the Teicheche. There's the inyan of Heshivcha Hashem Mitzrayim, the very concept of captivity. That's one concept of Teicheche, and specifically to Mitzrayim, which is a place that Yidden know how bad it is. Ba'aniyos, a level of captivity that Yidden are suffering on ships, which is a more extreme situation. And Baderech Hashamarti L'chol Eisais V'Oid L'Roisa means that Yidden are also going to go through the Midbar. They're going to go through a Midbar Gadol V'Hanayra. That's another point of suffering. That's a place that is a very dangerous place. And then V'Smakartem Shomlei V'Echal Avadim L'Shvachais is another point of Teichachet, describing how bad the conditions in captivity will be, that they'll try to do whatever they can to get out of it, even to be sold to their enemies as slaves. And then Ve'en Kaina is the last point, another point of Teichachet, which is the Herek V'Kiloyin that will be decreed upon the Yidden. So now the Rebbe will take all of this and explain every single detail how this is in the positive. Vigeret, Frias Yif Aleph, is Rashi Merames B'Yene Shal Teire V'di Divrei Teichache Zene B'Pnimiyusam In Yonim Nailam B'Yaiser. All of the words of the Teichache, really, it's all very high levels and big brachas that the Eibusher is giving Yidden. The Kavane von der Teichache is doch, as durch dem sollen Yidden zukommen zum Ilif und Tshuva. What's the purpose of the Teichache? The purpose is that the Yidden should come to Tshuva. Wie the Pasuk sagt, as the Pasuk says, V'hoya ki yavoyu alecha kol advara me'ela abracha v'aklala v'ashivaisa levavecha goyme and v'shafto ad avaya lekecha. The point is that you'll come to do tshuva. V'yeshleimar, as the Riber is besiyum v'chaysim from the Teichache, merum is ater inyan. At the conclusion of the Teichache, this concept of tshuva is what's hinted here. The kavana from the Teichache, und the ilu was vert al yadei hat tshuva. The purpose and the level that you come through the Teichache, that it'll bring Yidden to do tshuva. The Maila from tshuva is, so what's the big Maila of tshuva? Wie the Gemara sagt, G'deile tshuva, shes daines, nases loi kezachias. The greatness of tshuva is that you're able to take even zedaines, those avedas that were done intentionally, and do tshuva and elevate them and transform them into being merits. Then now, through tshuva, you have a new category, a complete new, unique level of zachiyas, transformed avedis. Even the greatest tzaddik does not have this level of zachiyas. And on a deeper level, what this means is, these, the sparks of holiness, was fallen up, Durech Zedainis and Gimel Klippus Atmeis, that fell in a very low place into the Gimel Klippus Atmeis. Veren Nepach L'Zachias. Those holy sparks get elevated and transformed into Zachias. Right, so of course we're not talking about the very Avedis themselves that get transformed, but we're talking about the holy sparks that are here in this world, that fell into such a low place. A Baal Tshuva is able to elevate them even from this place of the Avedis themselves to become Zachias. Which is not possible when it comes to a tzaddik with his aveda. Kenar mevare sein, die nicht zeitzis, weil chazenen in die dvaram ametarim. Was nehmen sich von klippes neiga. A tzaddik could only elevate those sparks that are impermissible things, that is klippes neiga, a level of klippe where you can transform it. It's allowed to be used, and the intention of Torah lechatchila is to use them in the positive sense and to bring them into kedusha. But he can't go down to a place which is Oster, Avedis, Gimel Klippus Atmeis. A Baal Tshuva, however, is able to elevate even from such a place. Wie bald, as die Zeitis de Kedusha, was gefinnen sich in Gimel Klippus Atmeis and are abgefallen gor, niderik, lemata, mata beyeser. So since these are holy sparks that are found in such a low place, in the very lowest place, is the fun gufe, move on. So from this itself we understand, as a sheirish in kedusha is gar hoyach. It must have a very high source if it falls so low. Heche vidu sheirish anitzeitzis shenaflu in klippus noiga. In fact, it has a higher source than those sparks that fall into a place of klippus noiga. Vidu klala yedua, as the famous rule that it says, that's brought in Chassidus, kol hagavaya yaiser, neifel lamata yaiser. The higher the source it comes from, the lower down it falls into this world. So the fact that these sparks come so low means that it has to have a very high source. So when you elevate and bring these sparks back to their source, so you're connecting them to a very high place, higher even than everything else that exists in the world, so you draw down from that very high source a tremendous revelation. And thus is the Pirish Apnimi in Pasik. So this is the deeper explanation in the positive of the Pasik here when it says V'ashivcha Hashem Mitzrayim. As the Kavane in the Al Divrei Teicheche. The purpose of all of the Teicheche is ungedated in Zeir Siyim V'chaisim, is here indicated in the conclusion of all the Teicheche, which is V'ashivcha Meloshen Tshuva. The word V'ashivcha means to return, to do Tshuva. Zu bringen zum Ilui von Tshuva. All of the Teicheche should bring about what it says here, V'ashivcha, to do Tshuva. Was der Ilui is Merumez and Hemshech HaKasov. And the Maila that Tshuva brings you to is hinted in what the Pasuk says afterwards. Aleph is Makartem Sham Le'oivecha La'avadim V'lishvachis. That you're there. Tshuva reaches down to a place of there by your enemies. Which means, as from B'chinas Sham, from a level that's referred to as there, far away, which is Makim HaKlippis. The term Sham, in Chassidus it explains, refers to a place of Klippah that's far, disconnected from the source. And Oivecha, a place of your enemies in Klippah, is men mevarer dinit tzaitzes kedusha. In Tshuva, you reach to that place of Sham and Eivecha, and you elevate those sparks into holiness. And Beis, another mile of Tshuva is, and durch dem werd ve'ein kaina. What does ve'ein kaina mean? Wie de zwei perushim in ein mazel Yisrael, just like the language that the Gemara says, ein mazel Yisrael, that you didn't have no mazel, so it could also be read as ayin mazel Yisrael, the level of ayin, which is above the reality of all the Eilumis. L'mayla Meseder Shtalshalos, ayin, that's the source of the neshama of a Yid. And over here as well, ayin is kaina. The level of ayin is acquired. What does this mean? Tshuva elevates you to a level that you can draw down even from ayin, from a place that's above any level that we could comprehend. And ayin is even higher than the level of kaina. What's the level of kaina? Ki yidua as kaina is ba'olam atzilus. The term kinyan refers to the world of Atzilus, Ki yidua bepirish baruch kainach. When we say baruch eisech, baruch yetzerech, baruch bayrech, that refers to Bria Yitzira Asiyah. Then it says baruch kainach, which refers to Atzilus. On ayin, hechef on Atzilus. Through tshuva, you come to ayin, kaina, that the level of ayin is drawn down to Atzilus because we're reaching even higher than Atzilus. Und das alles wird aufgetan durch Avedas HaTshuva. This is all what's accomplished through the Aveda of Tshuva, which is what the pasuk began with, Ve'eshivcha, that through tshuva you reach very low, into Sham, into Eivecha, and from there you elevate to the level of ayin, you draw from the highest place. Und das, in them, so this is in the pasuk. And them is Rashi, B'yene shel teire, meisif noch mer apnimi is the genyan. So here, as we said before, in Rashi, every detail that Rashi says comes and adds even deeper, also regarding the bracha, the positive that you see here and what the pasuk is saying. Wie bald as Yidden zenen achelek aleka mimal mamish. Since Yidden are a part of the Eibishter, kann man nicht sagen, as the ganze Kavanas HaYiride von der Teicheche is not to leave dem Ilui, was wird aufgetan in den Nitzaitzes. So we can't say that the purpose of the Yidden coming down in this world is just for elevating the holy sparks that are here, including a Bal Tshuva that elevates the sparks that are in the lowest place. Nor es ist euch Ubeikir zu lieb dem Ilui, was wird aufgetan in the Yidden Gufa. The purpose of the Yidden coming down is also and primarily for the purpose of the Neshamas themselves, for the Aliyah that comes to the Yidden themselves. And this is also true here regarding Tshuva. The main Aliyah that the purpose of Tshuva is not just to reach so low to elevate the sparks that are in such a low place, but the purpose of this Yiride is for the Yidden themselves. Kiyudua, and as it's known, as Tshuva poyalt an Aliyah sholei be'erech, that Tshuva creates and brings about an elevation, nit not in dem Cheftze, the Nitzaitzes Kedusha, an elevation not only in the object of the world. In this case, what we're speaking about is the holy sparks that are here in this world that are getting elevated. Not Eichen Gavra. Tshuva brings a tremendous elevation to the person doing Tshuva. On the Pratia Ilui, the different details of the levels that a person comes to through Tshuva, is Rashi mevayer in sein Pirish oif vis makartem ve'en kaina. Rashi explains in the two Rashis of vis makartem ve'en kaina what are the details of the person, where is he getting elevated to through his tshuva. So what does Rashi say? Vis makartem sham lo'ivecha la'avadim v'lishvachis. What does this mean? Atem mevakshem liyas nimkarem. You will desire, you will want to be sold. which means as follows. Der Ilui and Avedas HaTshuva, the big mila that a person gains through Avedas HaTshuva is was durch dem wer der Id an Eved Lashem. Specifically through Tshuva is where the person himself becomes an Eved, he becomes a servant for the Eibishter. Und die Mila von Eved besteht in dem, was atem mevakschen, liest nun karem chulo. The Mila, the true Mila of an Eved is the fact that you yourself choose, your desire is on your own. You want to be that Eved. This is Aveda b'koyach atzmai. This is an Aveda that you're doing here from below, that you're elevating yourself to be that servant for the Eibishter. And that's specifically the concept of an Eved, of a servant, which comes through Tshuva. Das ist nicht wie der Aveda von Bechinas Bonim. This is not similar to another type of connection to the Eibishter, which is the connection of what children, like children that have a connection to their parents. So that's the Aveda Satzadikim. The Aveda of Tzadik is the Aveda of Bonim. V'zeir Aveda v'iskashush lelekos is a teva benafsham. That their connection is expressing the nature that is there, that there is in their soul. Valdos was by zei herzach lelekos. So by tzadikim they could sense godliness. They sense that natural connection that they have. Und sie ziehen sich zu Elokus b'avidasam. So therefore, in there, when they serve the Eibishter, they're drawn to Elokus mitzad their neshama, that they sense the revelation from above. So therefore, kommt be'ikir nit mitzad zeir ishtadlus v'aveda. So this is not an aveda that they created on their own effort, that they created this connection. No mitzad Elokus, mulmayla. It's because of the neshama that they have, and therefore they are very sensitive to the revelation from above, and they're naturally drawn to that revelation from above. That's a tzaddik. That's the level of bonim. Masha'enkein avodas abal tshuva. When it comes to abal tshuva, was begaloi is given meruchik from Elokus. In a revealed sense, he's distant. He's disconnected from the Eibishter. Is the aveda nit mitzad gilim el maila. So over here by a bal tshuva, his aveda is not because there's a revelation from above that he's sensitive to. Mitzad Elokus, from the Eibishter's perspective, bringing him and that drawing him. The was a filter in, a geschmack, und im tzitz ton der aveda, he feels the enjoyment of his aveda, and he's drawn to this, to do this aveda. That's not a bal tshuva. He doesn't have that sensitivity. He doesn't feel that connection. Adarab, das ist gar heipich teva jetzt. On the contrary, for a Bal Tshuva, it's contrary to his nature right now. He's in a place where he feels nothing at all. Nor, hat sich übergemacht bekoyach atzmai umitzad atzmai zieht sich zu Elokus. He transformed himself. He had to work on himself to create this connection and to be drawn to this, to be drawn to the Eibishter. And that's what Rashi is saying here. The milo of a Bal Tshuva is that you're going to be sold as a servant to serve. And where does this come from? You yourself. Not anyone else, not from any revelation of above, but you yourself will desire and create this connection from below. Und das ist der ikidige Eufen von Avedas Hashem. This is the real way. The Bechlal, not only a Bal Tshuva, but Bechlal, regarding Avedas Hashem, this is a real Eved Hashem means that it's coming totally from you. That it's you, that you created this. Bedugme, so an Eved, was tut sein Arbeit nit mitzad dem hergische Odden, was der Herzach bei ihm. Even in an Eved Gufa, so before the Rebbe was making a distinction between Bonim and Avodim, but even regarding an Eved itself, so you have two levels of Avodim. You have an Eved that appreciates who his master is, appreciates what his master is asking of him to do, and because of that, he does it for his master's sake. That's one level of an Eved. He senses, he appreciates what the master is about. That's not the full concept of a real Eved, totally dedicated selflessly. Adarab, he appreciates what he's doing. Rather, what's a true Eved? Adarab, on the contrary. As his he's doing something which is against his nature. Nor gibt sich iber zu dienen dem Adon mit seinem eigenen Koyach und Kabbalah. But nevertheless, it's against his nature. He doesn't sense what there is in this. He doesn't know what he's accomplishing. He doesn't what the Adon wants from him. But he has full dedication anyways. To break himself and to be fully dedicated, to accept what the Adon wants, whether he knows what it is, whether he doesn't. He's fully dedicated to do it anyways. That's a dedication that's real, that's full, and comes from the person himself, not because of anything that he senses or appreciates, because of who the Adon is. So this is what we see here in the Rashi Vismakartem Sham, Atem Mevakshem, that it comes from below. Al derech zeh is Rashi Megale in dem Pirish from Ve'en Kaine. Similar, Rashi reveals to us in the positive sense, in ve'en kaina, what this means. Ki yigzru alecha hereg v'kiloyin, that it'll be decreed upon you that you should be killed and exterminated. Inyan naile yaiser versus in Eden durach avedas hatshuva. So this as well contains in it a very high bracha, a very high concept in the aveda of tshuva. The pirish pnimi von hereg v'kiloyin is, the deeper understanding and the positive in hereg v'kiloyin is, azayin dik b'chayim b'olam hazeh gashmi, while you're here alive and healthy in this physical world. Steht in atnuah von hereg. The direction of that person's aveda is hereg, which means benegeh seine taivis, sein avar, that he's able to kill and to completely get rid of any of his desires and any of his past. Atnuah von oisvelt. He's in a movement where he's going out of everything in this world that separated him from the Eibishter. Umata kiloyin. And then Rashi adds the word kiloyin. What does that mean? Kol sa nafshi, that his soul is expiring to completely be one with the Eibishter. Metakaloy sa nefesh tzolakos. This means, as be'ez, a gefindt sich in olam hazeh. While he's here in this world, a neshama big guf in a body. Der gerechte, zu azama drege, zu welche die neshama wird nesale, betzeisam in a guf. He has that connection to the Eibishter, the same level of connection that the neshama has. When it leaves the body, he's able to come through tshuva to that level of connection, even while he's here in his guf in this world. Al derech the pirish from Chassidus, this is similar to the pshat that it says in Chassidus, in the Maimah Mishnah, that b'mei shana ki'ilu meis v'ava batel min ha'olam. A person that comes to the age of 100 years old, it's like he's died and it's like he's gone from the world. What is this Mishnah saying? It seems like this very negative thing. So what's the point there? So Chassidus explains, as b'shas hayid halt by the madrege from mei shana. When a yid comes to the level of 100 years old, what does this resemble? What does this refer to? At hat alle mei madrege darges shainis. He already has accomplished and serves the Eibishter on all levels, which includes many different kinds of levels. He's already elevated all of his kaiches to the Eibishter. Each one of the kaiches includes 10 in it, so that's 100 kaiches. Everything is dedicated. Is there avar ubatel min ha'olam? What does this mean? Is in ganzen hecher von Welt. He gets elevated. He's removed. He's totally higher from the world. Ubemele is a kilo meis. What does it mean, kilo meis? Biz as oich dole mata kena zena lakus. A meis means that he's totally dead, no life, totally removed of the experience of this world. And even being in this world alive, he can see a different reality in this world. He sees godliness in this world. While a person's alive, you can't see in the gashmis of this world. When you're in a guf, you can't see elikos the way you see it once the neshama departs from the body. When you're alive, you can't see, but only after the neshama leaves the body, then you see. But this individual, since he is on a level like the neshama departed from the body and he's removed from this world, even while he's alive, he sees nishmasai begufay, a neshama in his body. This that you usually could only see only after the neshama departs from the body. So that's the pshat over here. Hereg v'kiloyin. The elevation of tshuva brings you to a level that you could connect and be one with the lakos, even here in this world, like when your neshama is hereg, when it leaves the body. The remes is doch. An additional point here is as follows. The truth is, as nitna the teicheche gufe is to lieben iluf and shuva. It's not only the teicheche itself that the point of all these punishments are to bring a yid to do tshuva. Norech the sibbe was the reisgerufen the teicheche. The cause, in other words, the averis that brought about the teicheche, is to lieben tachlis from tshuva. The Eibishter only allows all of these averis to happen in order that a yid should then come to tshuva. So what this means is, Chach begiloi is das mitzadi chatoim was jeden tun bebchirasam achavshes. What brings the teicheche is the averis that jeden did with their own free choice. Aber bepnimius is euch das gufan inye was kommt mal maila. But bepnimius, the truth is that this itself, that the Yidden's sin is something that comes from above, which means that Eibishter bringt Yidden in dem matziv. The Eibishter brings Yidden into a situation that they sin. Kidei, ze sollen zukommen zum Milli von Tshuva. Only that, afterwards, through this, the Yidden should come to the Maila of Tshuva. This is a concept that we learned not long ago in Parshas Masei, where the Mittler Rebbe, based on the pasuk Neira Lila B'nei Adam, regarding the Chetei Tzadas, explains that the Eibishter allows Chatayim to occur only for the Yid then to elevate himself from those Chatayim to come to a higher level of tshuva. And it's not a contradiction to Bechira Chavshis, as the Rebbe pointed in that Sicha, but the point is that even the Chatayim itself, the purpose is to come to tshuva. Und das ist euch merum ist in dem Anheb vom Pasik, Ve'eshivcha Hashem goyme b'derech asher amarti l'cha le'seise v'yod l'reisa. So here's another thing that's hinted when the Pasik says, Ve'eshivcha Hashem, that the Eibishter brings you back where? In this very same way that I said that you should not come and see it again. Which means, euch das was Yidden gain, in dem derech Oster. This itself, that Yidden go in a pathway which is forbidden. In dem derech was der Eibishter hat angesagt, that you're not allowed to go on this way again. Is bipnimi is verbunden mit der Anhagamul Maila. The fact that a Yid goes on a pathway which is forbidden, doing Averis, is all something that comes from above. Ve'eshivcha Hashem. It's a purpose that the Eibishter wants to take out of this. But the kavane, so that Haibe nach dem the Yidden to tshuva. The purpose is to then elevate Yidden to come to tshuva. Und das ist euch, was Rashi teitscht, ba'aniyais b'shivya, that Yidden come in captivity. As the Yeride, von Yidden in Mitzrayim, when Yidden come down to Mitzrayim, the Mitzarim, Gvulim, Helim, Hester, the limitations and the concealment of this world, is nit b'ritzayne von dem Yidden. It's not really his own will that brings him here. Nos is b'shivya. He's captured. Das Viertem, der Eibishter, Bal Karchai, it's the Eibishter that's leading him here against his will, with the Karvane, zu der Firenim, zum Ili von Tshuva, with the purpose to bring the Yid to come to do Tshuva. The Eibishter is bringing you here in this place, in a place that's forbidden, to do these Averis, and then to bring you eventually to come and do Tshuva. That's the concept of Shivir, captured in the control of the Eibishter that's bringing you to ultimately the Maila of Tshuva. Alpi kolanal vet man euch verstehen, das was Rashi is mefarish ba'aniyos besfinis. That ba'aniyos, the ships, so Rashi says besfinis, that it means these ships. That's the title of the word ba'aniyos. Is this not a pirish from word aniyos? Rashi is not just coming to translate what the word aniyos means. Nor the mit is Rashi euch merames. Rashi here is hinting as like pnimi is the genteichen from pasuk, that in the deeper understanding of the pasuk was Rashi gitareis beyenishal teira, as Rashi explains in the yenishal teira, the positive is donegeya der inyan funaniyos wie es wird geteicht sfinis. It's not only boats or ships in the language of the pasuk, but it's also in the translation of sfinos, the way Rashi explains it. What's the difference? The beer bezet. The explanation is as follows. Aniyos is in Yonom zum Megen sein auf den Menschen, be'ez, sie darfen durchgehen, die Wasseren von Ayam, or the Teich. What is the purpose of a ship? It shields and protects a person when he has to go through the water, when he has to go through the ocean, or any other a lake, whatever it is, or a river. The same is also true what the purpose of a ship is in the Ruchnis the sense. B'shas an neshama kum tarap lamata, when the neshama descends here below, in the mayim azidainim from Eilam Hazeh, in the waters, in the very stormy waters of this world. Darf sie haben a dover amegin as is on adveren vertrunken chas v'shalom. So it has to have a protection that it shouldn't be drowned in this waters. On in the waters. Und das ist durch Sfinais, and those are the ships, the Aveda from Teira and Mitzvahs, so that's Teira and Mitzvahs, which shields and protects a person that is, from the stormy waters that there are in the worlds. In them, and zwei madreges. But here, in Teira and Mitzvahs, or with the protection from these stormy waters, there are two levels. Aleph, Aniyas, dem Nomen, from Dover HaMegid, and Lashon HaKodesh. Aniyas is the name for these ships in Lashon HaKodesh, in the Lashon of the Teira. Das heißt, die Aveda von Teira und Mitzvahs, wie das wird getan in der Welt von Kedusha. This refers to the Teira and Mitzvahs that a person fulfills, all within the framework of holiness. But then, there's another level here, in which Rashi says, Sfinois, the nomen in Lashon von Targum. Sfinois is the name for ships in Targum, in the translation of Rashi. Das heißt, wie es kommt herab in der Welt von Targum. This is the protection as it is in the world of Targum from the Ayin Umais, which is a language being translated to the 70 nations, which is the place in the Aveda Vayid to refine and elevate into holiness. Das is the Aveda von Shuve as these Deinis Alvanizachis. So this is connected to the whole theme that we spoke here about, that the Teicheche and the Avedis, everything, the point is to come to Tshuva, which is coming in a place of the Ayin Umais, in the place of Targum, to elevate even those Deinis to come to Zachias. So Zog to Rashi. So this is what Rashi is saying here. As wie bald, da retzich wegen Mesaken sein am Matze von Yeride mitzat Chatoyin. The Teicheche is all a theme talking about correcting and elevating a situation of Avedis, which is going in a pathway that I said that it's forbidden, that you should not go there, and see it again. The Rebbe, darf man da ankommen, so azah say der Aveda v'hagana. So here, the Aveda that's necessary and the protection that you need in this place is, was besteht nit nur von aniyos, that consists not only of the Aveda v'aniyos, which is the ships, in the Lashon of Teira, which refers to Teira and mitzvahs in the framework of Kedusha, not oich von sfines. But it also refers to an Aveda done in ships, in the Lashon HaTargum, in Olam Hazeh, in the place of Zedainis, which is the Aveda of Tshuva. Yehi Ratzen, as durch dem Limud jenisch al Teira, Pnimius HaTeira von der Divrei Teicheche, soll bekarev mamish nesgala werden, der Pnimi is the Geteiv von Divrei Teicheche beteiv hanireva nigle. Through learning this pasuk in this way and understanding the Teicheche on this deeper level and seeing the positive, it should all be revealed. We should see the open and revealed good as yeder zal zen be'enei basar beteiv hanireva nigle and bana chayim ezayne reviche, to see open revealed good in all areas needed, in children and life and health and in sustenance. And Reviche, and have it in broadness, and have it in Barchava. Und die alle Teicheches sollen kommen, alle Vecha, val Seinecha, Sheredafucha. And all of these Teicheches shall be brought on all of your enemies. Und jede Yid, Besecheche, Klal Yisrael, all Yidden amongst the entire Klal Yisrael, vet nichta, venechtam, bekesive, vechsim, meteve, l'shana teva, mesuke, beteva, nireva, nigle, bis to their bracha, klalis, to the ultimate bracha, which is, bis Mashiach Tzidkenu, b'meheira, v'yameinu, mamish.